police, fire, medical.
I need emergency, please.
What?
Ambulance. Someone is hurt. Lacerate cuts.
Okay, who's cut?
Next door, who is this? It's a teenager.
Okay, male or female?
The girl or a boy? I think it's a girl. They have a major cut to their neck.
Do you know what happened?
I don't know. My husband heard someone screaming and then we came outside.
Ma'am, do you know if this person was assaulted?
I don't know. We just came outside. They have a major wound to their neck and they're struggling to breathe.
Are they awake?
I don't think they're even responsive at this point.
Is she breathing?
I don't see any breath. Yes, breathing.
Okay. She is breathing, you think?
Yes, but struggling.
Ma'am, is the blood spurting or pouring out?
No, it's all over the ground.
Okay, but is it spurting out or pouring out of the person?
It may have already. I don't think this person has any more blood.
Okay.
It looks like a knife wound.
Okay.
I don't think
Get it
breathing
clean,
with us
right?
anymore.
Yeah.
I don't see them breathing. I don't think they're with us.
In a jealous rage, a killer stabbed his victim multiple times and attempted to sever her head before fleeing into the woods as someone stepped out of their home hearing the commotion. The killer left his victim to bleed to death. Why did he do it? And why were the warning signs ignored after his first victim? Before we begin, we would like to send our sincere condolences to the loved ones of Kay Baker, who fell victim to the abominable acts described in this case. This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. If you're looking for a game that will put your tactical skills to the test and enjoy slaughtering massive monsters with your carefully crafted armies, then arm yourself and prepare to undertake many challenges waiting for you in Raid Shadow Legends. Raid allows you to enhance your champions by unlocking masteries that make them specialists in their field, giving your champions more of an advantage in battle. Choose wisely as you pick through the many masteries available to you. Between now and February 10th, Raid is hosting a special Champions Elect event where you get to vote on your favorite starter champions. Participate for your chance to win some awesome prizes, including epic and legendary champions, in-game items, and Amazon gift cards. Only new U.S. players can win a prize. To make the new year even more exciting, Raid has released a new legendary champion, American professional wrestler Ronda Rousey. Claim Ronda by logging in and playing for 7 days between now and February the 20th. Use promo code RAIDRONDA to get a bunch of helpful stuff. And if you haven't started playing Raid yet, click on the link in the description or scan the QR code here on the screen and you'll get unique bonuses worth $35. We're talking a free epic champion, Jotun, 100,000 silver, 50 gems, and 2 epic skill tomes. All this treasure will be waiting for you here, available for 30 days to new players only. Meet Kay Elizabeth Baker, a 43-year-old woman living in Lithia County, Florida, with her 2 sons. Kay was a 3rd-grade math and science teacher at Cypress Creek Elementary School in Ruskin, beloved by her students and peers. It was on a quiet, warm spring night on May 28, 2022. Jonathan Figgins, who lives next door to Kay, was sleeping peacefully on his couch, his wife and children sound asleep upstairs. It was right after midnight when Mr. Figgins heard unsettling sounds that roused him from his sleep. The best he could describe what he heard was the sound of someone falling on the floor and then a female gasping for breath. Mr. Figgins first thought one of his daughters had fallen out of bed and hit the floor, but when he went upstairs to check, everyone was sound asleep in their beds. Upon investigating outside, Mr. Figgins spotted what he believed to be a teenage girl laying face down on the ground near his front yard. This woman later was identified as Kay Baker. Kay was lying in a pool of blood that appeared to be coming from around her neck. While checking the status of the injured woman, Mr. Figgins heard a sound from behind. He turned to hear a rustling sound that appeared to be coming from the wooded area behind his home, but he saw nothing. Mr. Figgins told his wife Ruth to call 911. By the time fire rescue and the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office deputies arrived, Kay was gone. The medical examiner who inspected Kay's body at the crime scene discovered that she had multiple stab wounds to her shoulders and neck. Kay's neck laceration was so extreme, detectives concluded that the attacker had intended to sever her head from her body. Deputies searched the perimeter of Kay's home. In the driveway, detectives found a gray Ford Focus. After running the tags, they found out that it belonged to a Matthew Terry. One window was open and the screen was knocked out. The room belonged to one of Kay's boys, neither of which were home that night. This window was facing the Figgins home. From the window, turning right led to the front yard area, the area where Kay had been found. Left led into the backyard, where drops of blood were discovered. Detectives were able to quickly obtain a search warrant to enter Kay's home. Inside the house, it was noticed that in the kitchen a single knife was missing from a butcher block knife set, and a cell phone had been left nearby. The knife missing from the set was a specialized paring knife called a bird's beak knife, given that name because of its 3-inch curved blade, which resembled a parrot's beak. The knife was never located. The bathroom door frame had major damage, showing that someone had violently forced the door open at some point. The main bedroom showed recent signs of forced entry as well, and another cell phone was found on the nightstand. Deputies found the door to the child's room with the open window was locked, so they had to force the door open. They found no one inside the house. To follow the blood trail, deputies brought in a bloodhound. The scent led the dog into a thick wooded area behind the subdivision. After trailing the scent for a while, the bloodhound led the deputy to an area of woods off of Lithia Pinecrest Road. There, they found a patch of grass covered in blood. Knowing there was a good chance that the perpetrator was nearby, deputies decided to bring out a different canine unit, a Belgian Malinois, one trained to attack and apprehend criminals. Deputies led the dog towards the blood found by the bloodhound and shouted out warnings that they had a dog that will bite if whoever is out there doesn't come out. After a moment, the dog begins barking and attempts to charge forward. They soon found Matthew hiding in the tall grass and bushes. He was wearing only a t-shirt and his underwear. His clothes were soaked in blood. Matthew had injuries on his neck and was having difficulty walking. After apprehending Matthew, police ended their chase and Matthew was arrested on first-degree murder charges. May 27th marked the last day of the school season. To celebrate, Kay went to the Landing Bar and Grill that night with her boyfriend, 47-year-old Matthew Terry. At some point, Kay and Matthew got up to use the restrooms. Kay came out first and happened to run into a friend of hers, Kelly Andrews. Excited to bump into each other, Kay starts doing a little happy dance. As Kay is doing her little happy dance, a man, unknown to either Kay or Kelly, walked by and playfully mimicked Kay's happy dance as he passes by. This lasts for maybe 4 seconds. This interaction between Kay and the stranger occurred right as Matthew was walking out of the restroom. Matthew immediately jumped to the conclusion that Kay had danced with another man and became furious. At the bar, Matthew starts an argument with Kay, angrily accusing her of dancing with another man. This accusation is heard by both Kelly and a nearby bar patron. Matthew and Kay left the bar and headed home around 11:30 p.m. It was about a 90-minute drive back to their home, and Matthew continued to argue with Kay about dancing with another man. Kay decided to call Kelly and have her tell Matthew that she wasn't dancing with a passing stranger. Kelly overheard Kay tell Matthew to stop being stupid. After the phone call, Kelly received a text message from Kay at 11:56 p.m. that read, "LOL, sorry for that, so dumb, all good now." About 30 minutes later, Mr. Figgins found Kay bleeding to death in his yard. Investigators at the crime scene believed Matthew had attempted to murder Kay while he was in a drunken rage. They believe he stabbed her multiple times and attempted to remove her head before she found a way to escape through a window and made her way into her neighbor's yard. Kay was not Matthew's first victim. He had a criminal history of violence towards women, which Kay was well aware of. 5 years before Matthew murdered Kay in a jealous rage, he was in a relationship with a woman named Michelle Rogers. Matthew and Michelle had met over a dating app in 2015. They both lived in Michigan at the time. Michelle lived there with her 5-year-old son. Matthew had spent a few years in the Marines. Around the time he met Michelle, he was working as a wrestling coach. After dating casually for a few months, Michelle decided that she wanted to end the relationship. That is, until she found out that she was pregnant. For the baby, Michelle thought it best to make her relationship with Matthew work. Soon, they moved in together. But all too soon, it became apparent that Matthew was abusive and violent, and these behaviors worsened when he drank. Once, he threw a cast-iron pan at Michelle while she was holding their infant son. Another time, Matthew picked up her cat and threw it against the wall. On nights when he was both angry and drunk, Matthew would show up at Michelle's apartment and bang on her door saying that he knew she was sleeping with another man and would demand to be let in. During that time, Matthew worked for a local internet provider. One day, he told one of his co-workers he wanted to stab the out of Michelle. The co-worker took Matthew's statement as a way of venting and thought nothing more of it. But a few months later, on March 17, 2017, it was brought to light just how serious Matthew was. Matthew and Michelle had gone out bar hopping with a few of their friends that day. Around 6 p.m., Michelle was ready to go home. She went looking for Matthew, who happened to be at a bar adjacent to the one that she was in. Michelle found him so drunk he was slurring his words and stumbling. Michelle was so upset by how drunk Matthew had allowed himself to get that she went home and left him at the bar. Around 8 p.m., Matthew comes knocking at the back door.
He knocked at that door and I proceeded to let him in. At that time, he was very clearly drunk. He couldn't walk straight. He seemed just very, it's hard to describe, but just you could kind of sense his energy as being very frustrated or angry or upset, just in general, just a general sense.
So as the kids say, you got a vibe off of him that he seemed angry?
Correct.
Did you do anything in that moment?
I did not. I went and I sat back down on the couch where I was when he showed up.
And what does he do?
So he went into the kitchen, and I believe he was making a sandwich. He was making some kind of food at the counter, and the kitchen and the living room area is pretty open. So as I was sitting on the couch, I could see him. So I remember sitting on the couch watching TV, and then the next thing I remember is standing behind the couch, and I'm looking at him in the kitchen, and I remember him coming around the counter and coming at me.
And before we get to the part where he comes at you, do you remember if you guys are having any sort of argument, if anything's being said, either he's saying something, you're saying something, whatever the case may be?
I don't recall any of that, no.
So you remember now all of a sudden there's a moment he's coming at you, and I want you to describe that as best as you can. Do you mean he's just leisurely walking in your direction?
No, he was coming at me very quickly and aggressively to the point where I kind of backed off and braced myself, and I actually verbally said, what are you doing? Oh my God, what are you doing?
And when you said the words to him, what are you doing, what, if anything, did he do?
He proceeded to knock me into the front door that was behind me, and at that point then we both fell to the floor. So then we're on the floor, and he's just trying to keep me on the floor, and he keeps punching me wherever he can find access to punch me, so whether it be the face, the chest, the back, wherever. And he was a wrestler, and the best way I can describe what he was doing is trying to keep me in wrestling moves and keep me on the floor so that I couldn't escape.
When you say he's a wrestler, you mean like in the WWE, or you mean like a high school coach?
A high school coach, or a coach. Maybe it wasn't high school, but he was a wrestling coach. And I can't remember if he wrestled himself, but as the struggle continues and I'm trying to break free, there was a point when I yelled at him. I said, I love you. Why are you doing this? And he said, no, you don't. Fuck you. I'm going to kill you. He just continues to, for lack of a better phrase, beat the shit out of me. And I keep trying to escape. There is a point where I'm able to stand up, and he continues to punch me in the face. At one point, he gets me onto the floor, and...
Are you still in the same place by the door, or has the fight moved?
Nope, it moved through the living room, and then where I landed on the floor was, I landed face first. with my upper body like on the kitchen tile, and then my lower half was on the carpet of the living room. And at that point, there was blood everywhere.
Where is the blood coming from?
I believe my nose. At that time, he had broken my nose. But I remember trying to push myself up, and he was on me. And every time I tried to push myself up, I couldn't grip on the floor because there was so much blood. And he would purposely put his weight on me and push me back down, so I was unable to get up.
And through all of this, are you fighting, resisting, trying to stop him?
Yes.
So what comes next?
So I remember laying there, and I was laying on my left side, and I remember seeing the trash can there. There was a black trash can, and at this point, he was taking both of his hands, and he was taking my head, and he was slamming it into the floor. And so every time he would do that, my vision would go black, and I thought he was going to knock me out, or I would be unconscious or something at some point. I was thinking, like, holy shit, that, is this really happening? And I was really disoriented and dizzy, and I was hearing all the shuffling in the kitchen. And then the next thing you know, Mr. Terry comes around behind me and stabs me in the neck.
When you say he stabs you in the neck, do you know what he stabs you with in the neck?
I didn't see it, but it was a knife. So at that point, again, it was just kind of the thought, like, holy shit, he just stabbed me with a knife. Like, I need to get the hell out of this house or I'm going to die in here. And so I remember standing up, and as I stood up, he continued to, try and stop me and try and punch me. I was able to get loose for enough time to be able to turn around, and directly behind me there was the garage door. So I was able to get the garage door open and run to the garage. So I pushed the opener with my left hand as I was running out, to try and get the garage door to open so I could escape that way.
And did the garage door start to open?
It did. And I ran towards it, but it was very slow. So I couldn't quite get under it right away before he was able to get to me again.
All right, so now you're waiting for the garage door open enough, and he attacks you again?
Yes.
Describe how he's attacking you again.
He was just trying to stop me from leaving, and we both fell to the ground at that point and somehow had rolled out of, the garage that was open, down the driveway.
So now you've spilled out onto the driveway, like out in public.
Correct.
And what's happening there?
So we were rolling down the driveway a bit, and I ended up in a position where I was under him and he was on top of me. He had used both of his hands to take my head and slam it into the cement multiple times. So he had the knife, and he had stabbed me 3 times in the right shoulder.
All right, so he's still armed with this knife, even though you fled out of the home and he's chased you.
Yes, and this entire time I'm screaming for someone to come help me.
At any point, do you realize that some sort of like neighbor or person nearby has responded to your calls for help?
Yeah, as I was screaming, I could very faintly hear voices across the street saying, get off of her, and just hear them talking. A lot of it I couldn't make out what they said.
All right, and so we're at a point where Mr. Terry and you are in the driveway, you're still fighting, he's still armed with a knife. Tell me what else he's doing and what you're doing in response.
So again, I'm screaming this entire time, that he's going to kill me and somebody please help me. But he had stabbed me those 3 times in the shoulder, and he went to bring the knife down again, and I had reached up and I grabbed with my right hand the blade end of the knife in midair, and don't ask me how I did it. I just grabbed, and I took the knife and I pulled it. Again, I'm on my back, and I pulled it across my face, and I just remember thinking he was going to like stab my eye out or something as I'm doing this, but I was able to pull the knife enough over that it fell out of his hand, and it fell to my left side. And then I kind of rolled over it and tucked it underneath me so that he didn't have access to it anymore.
And so once you've kind of tucked the knife under your body, rolled onto it, does he stop fighting with you, or does he still keep trying to get the knife?
No, he was still slamming my head to the floor, and he would reach down with his hand and he would try and like fish for the knife real quick, but then I would try to get up, and then he would hold me back down again, and then kind of just back and forth, like trying to fish for the knife, and I'd get up and he'd try to fish for the knife, and then he'd push me back down. And there was a point when he had gotten really pissed off because I was kind of holding the knife with my arm as it's tucked under me, and he reached down and he bit me on the forearm here to try and get the knife loose from my grasp.
Is that the only place he bit you?
No. Shortly after that, after he fished a couple more times for the knife and couldn't get it, he reached down and he bit me twice on the side of my left cheek to try and get me to let go.
And throughout all of this, are you screaming and yelling for help, asking him to stop, putting up resistance?
Yes.
So does the fight sort of end at some point?
Yeah, so we didn't live that far from the hospital and stuff, and as the neighbors were, I later found out they were on the phone with 911 at the time. We could hear sirens coming. You could hear them coming from around the corner, not too far away, and when we both heard the sirens, that's when he got up off of me and ran back in the house.
And what did you do?
I got up and I grabbed the knife so he couldn't get it back again, and I couldn't see very clearly because my contacts were in, but they were all like covered in blood. But I ran across the street to the voices of the neighbors who were telling me to come over there, come here. And then I proceeded to go across the street and I collapsed on my back in their front yard.
Like Kay, police found Michelle lying in her neighbor's yard after being bitten, beaten, and stabbed multiple times. Michelle was lucky to survive the attack. However, she had to spend 5 days in intensive care. A detective, Matthew Crumbach, who investigated the crime scene, said it was as close to a homicide as you could get without it being a homicide. For his violent acts towards Michelle, Matthew was charged with attempted murder. After being arrested for attacking Michelle, Matthew contacted an old friend to testify for him in court. That old friend was a woman he had dated nearly 20 years earlier. Her name was Kay Baker. Kay was more than happy to testify and stand up for her friend's character in court. She told the judge, "Matthew is very truthful and I trust him completely." Michelle tried desperately to get Kay to see the monster that Matthew truly was. During the trial, Michelle sent Kay photos of her stab wounds through Facebook Messenger and said, "Please don't let this be you." But Kay could only see the man she knew Matthew to be back in those days 20 years prior when they dated. Kay was not the only one defending Matthew. He had many friends and family in the courtroom supporting him. They all just glared and shook their heads as Michelle spoke in court. Somehow, Matthew's lawyer convinced the jury that his attack on Michelle was in self-defense. He further explained, being an ex-Marine, Matthew used his training to neutralize the fight that Michelle had started. Matthew was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison for assault with intent to cause great bodily harm. In a letter written to the Michigan Parole Board, Michelle said, "If he gets out, I fear for myself and my family, and for the next victim. Society is in danger." Michelle's warnings fell on deaf ears, and Matthew served only 3 years before being discharged in December of 2021. Matthew was released on good behavior and had passed a domestic violence class. Matthew stayed in touch with Kay during those 3 years he spent in prison. After he was released, he moved to Florida to begin a new life with her. All seemed to be going well until the dreadful morning of May the 28th shined a light on what was going on behind closed doors. Matthew claimed he was not guilty of hurting or killing his girlfriend Kay. However, prosecutors believe Matthew murdered her in a jealous rage because he believed that she had danced with another man while they were at the bar. After Kay's murder, investigator Crumbach, who was part of the team who investigated the crime scene after Matthew's attack on Michelle, told the Times that Matthew Terry was a textbook case of an evil, narcissistic, manipulative killer. The trial between Matthew Terry and the state of Florida began in November of 2022. Prosecutors worked hard to convince the jury that Matthew was responsible for the death of Kay Baker and wanted Matthew to receive the death penalty. They believed Matthew had also tried to take his own life after murdering Kay. That's why he was found with multiple cuts on his throat. Matthew's lawyers tried to convince the jury that Matthew and Kay had been attacked by an intruder who Matthew was unable to identify, and this perpetrator escaped out a window. Matthew's attorneys claimed that deputies gave up the chase too quickly. They assumed that Matthew was the killer immediately and therefore allowed the real killer to get away. Since the murder weapon was never recovered, Matthew's lawyers tried to downplay the size of the missing knife from the kitchen, the bird's beak knife, to state the knife's inability to do the damage that was done to Kay.
Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you about was the knives. You said you actually looked, and you're the one who found that there was that one bird's beak knife missing, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So that one bird's beak knife was the only one missing.
Out of the butcher block? Yes, ma'am.
And that is what we call a paring knife. It's a little curved knife, right?
Yes, ma'am.
There were a bunch of steak knives there, right?
Outside of the kitchen, or the block in the drawer?
Either in the block itself or outside of the block. There were a bunch of steak knives, right?
Yes.
Bunch of big knives too, right?
Yes.
And the one that we're talking about is a little itty bitty small paring knife, and that's the only one that was missing from the home, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have any idea if that ever even existed in the year prior?
I cannot tell you that.
Thank you.
Matthew's attorneys fought hard to keep the previous case between Matthew and Michelle out of the current case, knowing how damaging it would be for the jury to know about Matthew's violent history. They didn't, however, get their way. Michelle was brought in to testify, and she shared the assault that she had suffered at the hands of Matthew back in 2017, which possibly played a major role in the jury's decision. Within only an hour and 10 minutes, the jury unanimously convicted Terry on a charge of first-degree murder and sentenced him not to death, but to life in prison.
But based on what I heard, I believe that you should have been in prison in Michigan and that Miss Baker should still be alive. This is Florida. You're going to prison for the rest of your life. I adjudicate you guilty. I sentence you to life in prison. I impose all fines, fees, associated charges, and I advise you that you have 30 days to appeal the judgment and sentence entered against you. Thank you.
If you found this case compelling, don't forget to like the video, comment down below your take on it, and please subscribe to the channel. Also, hit the notification bell in order to stay up to date each time we reveal a new shocking case. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled. You never know what's lurking in the shadows.